Hello, BookTube, and Happy New Year to you all. I've been a little bit slower than normal coming back from my New Year's disappearance, uh, and so I haven't been around in quite some time. But I saw that Jason Harrigan made a return to BookTube for, I think, his 20th attempt at making a BookTube channel. And he nattered on for a glorious half hour about various new arrivals and also some e-reader news. And I thought, well, this can't go unanswered, right? No matter how slow I am recoalescing, I should certainly try to make a video. At least try to make a video. One today could lead to two tomorrow, and four the next day, and eight the next day. So I thought, since it's a little too early in the year, I'm a little too discombobulated for originality, I thought I would just copy Jason and also do a new arrivals slash e-reader video. The elephant in the room is my little bean. not any kind of actual elephant. And I thought we'd start with new arrivals, starting with periodicals. The year started off with a couple of periodicals that I don't usually read. I'm going to give them a try. The reason why I don't usually regularly read them, is because every time I try them, they largely disappoint me. They're square-bound pulp periodicals, but they're not science fiction. They're mystery. Alfred Hitchcock and Ellery Queen. Two square-bound periodicals. These are the January, February issues of each. And they are the companions out there on the newsstand to Analog and Asimov for science fiction. But with Analog and Asimov, I have always said, and it's true, that every single issue will give you at least one short story that is electrifyingly good. The kind of short story that you remember, the kind of short story that isn't just going through the numbers, it actually thrills you. I love that feeling. I absolutely love that feeling when I'm reading a short story. When that's the feeling that I get when I really do feel that someone has compressed a novel into a short story. That is just a great feeling. And obversely, I hate the feeling of a short story that's just going through the motions. And I'm not. Asimov and Analog have published large numbers of short stories that are just going through the motions. But thanks to their editorial team, in every issue, I know there'll be at least one story that's just bottled lightning. And I don't know that I can say that for the editorial team at either one of these magazines. There have been, every once in a while, when I'm near a newsstand or when I'm within striking distance of getting these things, I will try them, and more often than not, there's nothing that actually sings on the table of contents in any of either of the issues. So I got these two new ones. Ellery Queen, I believe, is the one that always has at least one Sherlock Holmes short story. It doesn't exactly bode well. Look at how bad that cover image is. Look at how stretched it is. It's like this came from some source, and the source didn't have that aspect ratio. Look at the gun. Look at Holmes's head. Now, it's not your fault if your original artwork didn't have that aspect ratio, but it is your fault if you're setting up the cover and you don't realize that it's just going to look awful. I mean, but I'm going to try both of them. I'm with a wide open mind. I will try both of them and see. Just see. So those are periodicals. Then we have one of these old Century paperbacks. I don't know if they're made in Ireland. They aren't made in America anymore. They're instantly recognizable. They're not particularly durable, but this was free. This is the Defeat of the Spanish Armada, the Armada by Garrett Mattingly. In these old Century paperbacks that are very distinctive. The paper is not the first quality, and the covers are kind of a cloth mat that really isn't put onto the spine very well. These things tend to fall apart, but this was free, so I grabbed it. I haven't read it in a long time. Garrett Mattingly is a great historian. If you can write a 400-page biography of a simpering moo cow like Catherine of Aragon and actually make her interesting, then you are a pretty good writer. And then he did that. I think he won the Pulitzer Prize for this book, which is about the defeat of the Spanish Armada, an inherently dramatic subject that is also the subject of another book by another favorite historian of mine. David Howarth did a book on the Spanish Armada that is fantastic. But this is too. and I don't have a copy of this. I don't think this will be the copy of mine that I keep, because these things just don't live. They just don't survive. But I haven't read it in a long time. So, and then this next one, I have to pardon a little bit of false advertising on the cover. This is A Presumption of Death by Jill Patton Walsh and Dorothy Sayers. Dorothy Sayers didn't have anything to do with this book. This is a Harriet Vane and Lord Peter Wimsey novel that actually follows them into World War II. But unlike the predecessor of this book, the predecessor of this book was called Powers and Thrones, I think. And something like that. Thrones and Dominions, Powers and Thrones, something like that. And it was billed as a Peter Wimsey novel. Dorothy Sayers wrote a great series of murder mysteries starring Lord Peter Wimsey and then Harriet Vane, and then the two of them together. And they're immortal classics. They're just immortal classics. They are incredibly good, rereadably good. And Jill Patton Walsh came to that corpus of writing after Dorothy Sayers' death, and with the encouragement of Barbara Reynolds, took some very sketchy notes and wrote that book. What's it called? I should probably Thrones Dominations is the name of the one right before this. It's the oldest publishing wheeze in the book. It's not actually true. The notes were on the back of a napkin. There wasn't anything. It was just a Jill Patton Walsh production. It was Jill Patton Walsh writing Lord Peter Wimsey and Harriet Vane pastiche fiction. And this doesn't even have that. This doesn't even have that napkin. This is just Jill Patton. That's why I objected Dorothy Sayers on the cover, because she had nothing to do with this at all. Not at all. The slight scrap of justification here is the Lord Peter Wimsey papers that maybe hinted at something along the lines of this book. No, ridiculous. This is entirely fan fiction. This is entirely pastiche fiction. I read, what was it called again? Thrones Dominations. I read Thrones Dominations because the whole literary world was talking about it, and largely praising it, largely saying that it was well done. I don't think I ever read this. I think there was one even after this. I don't think I ever read any of them because, well, when it comes to pastiche fiction like this, if no one's paying me to review it, then typically speaking, I look at it and I think, well, you could be reading this, or you could go back and read Five Red Herrings, or An Unpleasantness of the Laundry Club, or Gaudy Night. You could go back and read a Dorothy Sayers, Lord Peter Wimsey story instead of reading someone's pastiche, where the very highest acclaim that you'll be able to give a book like this is that it sounds exactly like a different author, which is kind of weird. I know this firsthand because I've written a great deal of pastiche fiction myself, but only for private enjoyment. I'm going to have to deal with it. I'm facing at least one major example of this kind of thing twice over in this new year. Because in this new year, I forget the exact month, I think it might be February, someone is coming out with a Judge D mystery. A murder mystery starring Judge D. And it isn't written by Robert Van Kulik. And it also isn't the original canonical Judge D stories. It's not either one of those. It's pastiche on a pastiche. It could be very good. So I'm going to have to get used to it. But this was free, and it might have details of interest in it that won't send me herring back immediately to the originals. Then this next one, do we have a date on this? This is just thrilling. Just absolutely thrilling. I'm looking for the date because unlike these first two, this is not old. This is new. Okay, mid-January. So this is coming right up. This is from Soho Crime, and I am overjoyed, just overjoyed that this is appearing. These are the Dave Brandstetter novels of Joe Hansen. I don't know how much of that is going to be known to any of you. Look at this lovely volume. This is 3 Dave Brandstetter novels. Fade Out, Death Claims, and the great novel Troublemaker. 3 in this one little volume. But according to the pub sheet, Soho Press is also coming out with individual volumes, with individual reprints of each one of those books. So the This omnibus, I don't know if it even has a price on it. This might be just for reviewers. It could be that the paperbacks for Fade Out, Death Claims, and Troublemaker are $15 each. And I presume they will have this cover art. It's really nice cover art. And this is amazing. I have read these books from the beginning, and it never occurred to me that anyone would reprint them. And God bless the folks at Soho Press. This is not the first time where I've seen some new product of theirs and thought somebody in their editorial team, or maybe the whole bunch of them, really know their books. But I want to read you. This comes out in mid-January. I want to tell you a little bit about this for those of you who don't know. This is for the gays, but it's also for everybody else because this is truly, truly good news. Published over 50 years ago. Oh, here, let me show you the book so you don't have to just stare at my nose the whole time. Published over 50 years ago, a time when being gay was illegal in 49 out of 50 states. Joseph Hanson's Dave Brandstetter novels shattered stereotypes and redefined the private eye novel as we know it. Spade, Marlowe, Archer, Brandstetter. That's how the line of succession should read. Instead, literary history skips over that fourth name to find later figures to include. But on literary quality, plotting, and sheer entertainment, Joseph Hanson's Brandstetter deserves a place at the table of West Coast PI greats. If you also consider cultural importance as a metric, then Dave may well stand alone. Dave Brandstetter, like his creator, was quite happily gay in a world quite unhappy about gays. Beginning in January 2022 with the republication of the first 3 Dave Brandstetter novels, Syndicate Books begins a year-long reissue project that will see back into print this important and criminally overlooked author. Okay, great. I didn't read the sheet before I was reading it with you, and that's great. That means they're going to do them all. Fantastic. Because that means eventually they'll get to Little Dog Laughed, which is, oh man, what a book. It is going to be such an unalloyed treat to encounter these books again, to read them again, when the Supreme Court of the United States says that gay marriage is legal. That is this, reading these in a future that when I read them originally was utterly unthinkable, just utterly unthinkable, is going to make them read different. Who is Joseph Hanson's Dave Brandstetter? Tall, handsome, smart, and successful is a good place to start. A native Californian, Dave is a World War II vet and the kind of serious, ruggedly independent, and above all decent man that people like to celebrate when they talk about the greatest generation. He's a death claims investigator for Medallion Life Insurance, and he's damn good at his job. And of course, these take place long before the internet or cell phones or anything like that. And the experience of reading these half a century ago, when the main character is gay, but he's not warped. He's not furtive. He's not weird. He's a normal guy. It makes you, reading them then was just amazing. It was just amazing. There wasn't anything like it other than Gordon Merrick. And Gordon Merrick is also unapologetically gay. His novels are also unapologetically gay. But you need a towel and a bucket, if you know what I mean. They're not exactly meant to be confused with great genre fiction, except porn. But aside from that and this, you had to wait probably, 15 years? What were the first, some of you will probably know this better than I do, Jonathan Kellerman's Alex Delaware novels. What was the first one of those? The first couple of those feature a side character who is a gay police detective. At a time when probably 30 states in the Union still considered it an absolute crime, and when most of the people in most of the 50 states in the Union considered it a mental illness, even if it was legal. To read these novels again, when all of that is gone, when not only is it gone, but there's a whole generation of readers that grew up without it. You don't ever know what that's like. They have to read about that in history books. To read these in such a situation will inevitably throw my reading emphasis onto the quality of the books, onto the prose and the dialogue and how the plots are hammered together. It'll inevitably do that because unlike the first time I read all these books, I won't be thinking about how unusual that is. I won't be thinking about the ground that it's breaking, which will free me up to think about the books themselves. So I don't know if you're going to see this anthology. You might not. you might see just the individual volumes. And it sounds like we'll see all the volumes, which is terrific. But put this on your list for January. If you're looking for a murder mystery series, especially now, I guess, they would be period murder mysteries. They are West Coast PI novels prior to the 21st century technology, prior to anything like that. So there'll be all sorts of attitudes, all sorts of pacing issues, lots and lots of nervous glances over the shoulder at Travis McGee. To have these back is incredible. I go on and on. I used to go on this channel about timid and poor reprint culture for genre fiction. So when an example comes along that is exactly the opposite of that, incredibly welcome, then I want to sing its praises. So the first 3 novels that Soho is doing come out in just a few days. In next, what is this? This is Thursday, the eve of a tiny little snowstorm here in Boston. So Tuesday is when those first 3 books will be available. So, go to your bookstore, and I ordinarily don't urge you to go to your bookstore, but $15 is not going to break the bank, I don't think, for a paperback, especially if it's going to look as nice as this artwork. That is terrific cover artwork. Or, bang the drum at your library. Make sure that they are going to get not only these 3, but the whole set that Soho is doing. Make sure they're going to get them. Boy, oh boy, though, that was a thrill to see that Soho was going to do that. Hats off to them. Then for the next one, we won't go far from murder mysteries, but we will go a little bit forward in time from the Brandstetter novels. I can't believe Dave Brandstetter is back. I can finally retire my crappy old mass market paperbacks that are falling apart. I can finally do that because they're all going to come back into print. Amazing. He wrote them for decades. Anyway, this next one is a lovely trade paperback. It's a lovely thing. It's Elizabeth George. Her Inspector Lindley novels are a favorite of mine. I really like them. And this is Just One Evil Act. This lovely trade paperback cover. And it's of interest to me, not only because I'm always interested in rereading, it was free, so I'm always interested in rereading these things, but also because Just One Evil Act has a singular reputation among the Lindley novels of Elizabeth George. These novels are beloved. Everyone loves them, except this book. Lindley fans, Elizabeth George fans, are almost universal in saying that this book is a complete failure. It centers entirely on Barbara Havers instead of on Lindley, and it moves the scene of the action back and forth between England and Italy in a way that readers say is completely unconvincing. Plus, they hate Barbara Havers. She, as far as detective sidekicks goes, she gets no love in the mystery world. And I can see why. Unlike Harriet Vane, she's incredibly annoying and ridiculous. You don't believe for a minute that she would be able to solve, a crime that a cat committed, much less an evil mastermind, and much less. But I read this book when it came out, before it got a stink on it from all the fans. And I remember I didn't particularly love it. I didn't think it was as good as Elizabeth George novels that I really, really loved. But I remember really liking the police characters in Lucca, in Italy. I remember thinking those characters were well done. In fact, if I remember correctly, I read this when it first came out, so we're going on 10 years now. Is that right? I remember when I first read it, I was thinking, well, gee, I would like to read 2013, so almost 10 years. I remember thinking I would like to read their continued adventures. They're all more interesting than Barbara Havers is. I got it because not only, unabashedly, because that is just a lovely cover, but also because I'm happy to give it another try. Happy to do that. Then this next one is forthcoming. It comes out in May, a long, long time from now. Also, like the Dave Brandstetter novels, a thing of joy, a cause for celebration. So I'll tell you all about it. This is called The Search for the Genuine by Jim Harrison. And this is collected nonfiction over the course of decades. And there is Jim Harrison as a young man. It's kind of weird since he became sort of totemic for what he looked like in older age. But let's see what we have here. This is the first collection of general nonfiction in 30 years from Jim Harrison. And I have one of those earlier collections here somewhere, probably in the same box with the Brandstetter novels. New York Times bestselling author Jim Harrison, who died in 2016, was a writer with a poet's economy of style and a trencherman's appetites. Best known for fiction and poetry, Harrison was also a prolific nonfiction writer with columns running in Sports Illustrated, Esquire, and work in Outside, Field and Stream, and others. This book collects Harrison at his best, from grouse hunting and ocean fishing to Zen Buddhism and matters of the spirit, as well as reporting on Yellowstone and shark tagging in the open Atlantic, commentary on writers from Bukowski to Neruda to Peter Mathiasson. The piece on Peter Mathiasson, it's just a symphony. It is pure Jim Harrison, just purely good. Bukowski, not so much, but they what are you going to do? Jim Harrison never stopped smoking. I'm amazed he isn't smoking in this picture. And when he was older than 50, he never stopped. Never, for a minute. Written with Harrison's trademark humor, compassion, and full-throated zest for life, this chronicle of a modern bon vivant is a feast for fans who may think they know Harrison's nonfiction from a true American original. I've heard a lot of criticism of Jim Harrison's fiction, his novels. I've almost never, I don't push them on people, and I've almost never had somebody say, yeah, that was a really good novel. I've almost never had anybody say that. Actually, to tell you the truth, I've almost never had anybody say that about his poetry either. I want to give you a quote here, something. I've almost never heard anybody say that about his poetry either. He's very much a let's see here. Let me read you a bit from the Peter Mathiasson piece, because it's word you won't understand. I won't read the whole of it, but there's a bit about how useless writers are outside of writing. We aren't used to our writers. I'm not going to do Jim Harrison voice. I could, but I'm not. We aren't used to our writers being able to do anything particularly well other than write. And Mathiasson is first and primarily a literary novelist. Ordinarily, if a novelist is a fine wing shot, that is, someone who murders birds, he is probably only a fine shot for a novelist. Of Norman Mailer, it could be said, quote, he's one of the best 50-year-old arm wrestlers in the arts. You know very well that every grain elevator and feed store in Kansas boasts a lout who could put him down in minutes. Ernest Hemingway was a rare exception, and this tends to irritate every critic who has ever written about him. Critics are notoriously sedentary. Take that personally. I resemble that remark. They have been known to divorce wives who are unable to carry them from the desk to the dinner table, whereas sports was a large part of Hemingway's life. Few novelists can write for more than 4 hours a day, and if you don't teach or aren't interested in literary parlor tricks or drinking yourself to death, you become an amateur sportsman of sorts. And Hemingway, whose basic athletic skills were not large, became a first-class wing shot, a big game hunter, that's someone who shoots animals, a skier, a boxer of some skill, and a master angler. That's someone who tortures to death clubs and then eats fish. You're noticing a trend here. He could be an arrogant and unruly brute on occasion, but this does not diminish the number of things he did well. Then we get the bravura paragraph. But you quickly run low on names, and the claims become strained. Vance Bourgeois is a great shot. Harry Crews is reputedly competent at karate and falconry. Larry McMurtry rode a horse. Galway Kinnell plays a fair game of tennis, for a poet. James Dickey hits a target with his bow with some regularity, a sport that can give you some profitable material. George Plimpton has been known to hit a duck, that is, to shoot a duck, out of the sky, and plays an underwhelming game of golf, though a very good game of tennis. Tom McGuane is an expert fly caster. J.D. Reed is one of the best trenchermen in the eastern seaboard. William Styron watches his wife play tennis. And after a fifth, Richard Brodigan can do 3 push-ups without stopping. Thomas Berger used to drive fast. The author is the 3rd best pool player in a village of 200. William Schwartzberg does bird calls for the 4 birds he recognizes: crows, starlings, ostriches, and pheasants. Robert Ruark has no doubt a better shot than a writer. Of course, the pieces aren't always funny, but it's going to be a delight to reread. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of them in here that I don't know, that I've never read. So fantastic. That's May. That's coming out. Don't know. This is Grove Atlantic. I have no idea if they're going to do something similar to the Brandstatter novels. No idea if they're going to try and reprint individual volumes of Jim Harrison, whether it be the novels or the nonfiction volumes that have come out over time. That would be very interesting. It would be great if the reading public at least had a chance to see him again. Same thing with Edward Hoagland. I'd love to see both of them available again. We shall see. Then this next one is out in a few days. This is a new release. This is Jonathan Evison's book, Small World, a novel with a surprisingly attractive cover. Considering it's the American edition, you would think that it would be ugly. And the superscript over the pub sheet calls it an epic novel for our time. I don't know what that could mean. Let's find out. An epic, sweeping, great American novel that intricately weaves entertaining family sagas spanning centuries, generations, and small and experience. This book amounts to a microcosm of the American experiment from its beginning to the present and beyond as we hurtle into an unknown future. We are not hurtling into an unknown future. Only Americans would think that history has never happened before until it happens to them. We are not hurtling towards an unknown future. We're hurtling towards a very known future. And the only weird part of it, the only thing that future historians are going to simply blank on, is why that is happening, why it's being allowed to happen. Ordinarily, the thing that is going to happen to America later on this year and then in 2024 is something that happens to it from outside. It's almost never just allowed to happen. You'd never guess that the people who don't want this to happen are actually in power and can stop it from happening. Anyway, simultaneously set against the thrum and relentless development of the Transcontinental Railroad in the mid-19th century, and on a modern train full of passengers brought together by fates stretching back 5 generations and 3 continents, the author, in his own words, swings for the fences in Small World, of course, but he is not simultaneously set in those 2 different places. That is just a dangler. No matter how elaborate in length it is just a dangler. The descriptive phrases at the beginning of the sentence have to be followed by the thing they're describing. That's just the way English works. To quote the Twitter meme, I don't make the rules. That's just the way English works. A concatenation, a series of descriptive phrases, has to be followed by the thing they are describing. It has to be the next thing after the sequence. The thing after the sequence calls those phrases. And in this case, it would be easy to rewrite. It's Evison's book, Swings for the Fences, not Evison. Evison's book does the things that the descriptive phrases say. He does not. He is not set in 2 different time periods. I don't think. The book connects a dynamic cast of characters comprising nearly 20 limited points of view, navigating 170 years of American history as immigrants from east to and west flood into the ports of New York and San Francisco looking for a better life, even as those who occupied the lands before them and those who were brought here unwillingly are scattered far and wide. Okay, well, the publishing goes on at enormous length after that. But this comes out on Tuesday. I think we might have seen the advanced copy of this book. This is the finished copy. It sounds like a sprawling thing. I, of course, have not got to it. I will have to get to it, maybe tonight. This next one we've seen on this channel before. Some of these might be reprints, repeats from recent videos or distant past videos. Now is not the time for me to remember. I will get sharper at that as the days go on. This is by Mark Sinnott, and it's called The Impossible Climb. Alex Honnold, El Capitan and the Climbing Life. And there on the cover, you see the subject of the book, Alex Honnold, the greatest free climber in the world. And what free climbing means is what you can almost make out on the cover. That is El Capitan, of course, with the seam-like cracks in Yosemite. There's a tall standing rock. You really should see it if you're visiting America. But when you see it, especially if you stand at the base or near the base, and you see these seams and these almost sheer face, it would stagger your imagination what Alex Honnold is doing on this cover. You can't really make it out because the picture is so small, but what he's doing is climbing the face of El Capitan with no support at all. No hammers, no pitons, no guide ropes, no nets, no nothing. He's just climbing it with his fingers and toes. So if he slips and falls, if he sneezes, if he passes out, then he falls to his death. A horrible death that the people have seen many times. It's happened many times. There's probably he's got boyish good looks, so there's probably lots of photos in here of his face. Yes, that the adult there is Alex Honnold. There he is in his van. I don't think he lives in the van anymore. There he is climbing El Capitan. You've got camera crews eagerly watching. There he is, more shots in the van. This is Mark Sinnott's book about him. The climbing life is a little bit odd for the life that's sketched in these pages, but this is terrific. You can probably tell from my tone of voice, I'm not a huge fan of either the so-called sport of free climbing, which just strikes me as an attempt to make your suicide go viral. But also Alex Honnold himself, who is just unbelievable in his ability to pull out hagiography from his profile writers and biographers. I don't get it. I just don't get it. They don't ever write about the dark stuff involved in Alex Honnold's world. They don't ever do that. They don't ever hint that it's there. It's just he's this big baby. But I still thought this book was great. I ranked it very highly, I think, on my year-end list for Steve Reads for that year. Which is, I should point out, since I've had a lot of questions about it, my Steve Reads year-end list did not disappear. They did happen in 2021. They just didn't happen on Open Letters Review, the online literary journal where I'm one of the editors. Instead, I put them on my website, stevedonahue.com. It didn't strike me as right to put them on a collaborative website as though they spoke for all the other editors, when they certainly don't. So I moved them, but they still exist. And this next book is also something that I reviewed. I'll have to remember to find that review somewhere and post it down below if I can. This is from years ago, and as soon as I saw it, I realized that I wanted it, and I had no idea what happened to my original copy. This is G.A. Bradshaw, and this is Carnivore Minds, who these fearsome animals really are. And there you have a grizzly bear, and you can tell from its ears that it is not swimming calmly. It is swimming energetically towards the photographer. The photographer is using a telephoto lens, probably a far, far distance from the bear. But it doesn't matter. The bear is still intent on killing the photographer. But this is all about carnivores. Usually the big look at that thing. Good Lord, are you insane to get that close? Please tell me that animal is dead. No, that creature's name is Brutus, and he's alive. That's a ton of crocodile that could kill that man without even trying. This is crocodiles. This is killer whales. This is grizzly bears. This is just all kinds of usually charismatic apex predators. I forgot these pictures, or maybe I never saw them. Maybe I got just an advanced copy of this thing and never got the finished copy. But I loved it. I loved the book, even though it deeply confused me. It deeply confused me. I mean, saying these things are magnificent and deserve, of course, ecological protection, and that they should be understood and studied and whatnot, is one thing. Saying that they're not violent, that they're actually peaceful and cuddly, which is all that she doesn't. This author doesn't. It is a she, isn't it? Yes. Oh, okay, now that's a photo I can live with. Saying that she doesn't quite go so far as to say that they're all just cuddly toys, but anyway, the last book that I want to show you before we get on to the e-reader things is still in a package, so we can open it together. Which, if I remember correctly, is always fun. A little bit blurry. Can't help. That's what they used to call me. So what have we got here? Got a package absolutely brimming with asbestos. But what's this? Oh boy. Okay, this is very advanced. So it's pinioned in cardboard with a rubber band, because this isn't even an ARC. This is before that. Oh great. Oh fantastic. Okay, all right, well, I have absolutely no information on this whatsoever. There's no pub sheet. There's no information on the back. There's nothing. Somebody just went to Kinko's and bound these pages for me, but I'm grateful, very much so. This is an author I really like. It's Alex Kershaw, who's a fantastic World War II author. And this is Against All Odds, a true story of ultimate courage and survival in World War II. Unfortunately, after a while, World War II books start to look the same. But this, anything by Alex Kershaw, I will absolutely read. So do I have anything here? Nothing at all? No, I don't have anything at all. Nothing at all. All right, well, let's start chapter 1 to see, would you keep reading? The silence was unnerving after several days at sea, crossing from America with the constant grinding of the ship's engines, quiet now in the Atlantic waters off North Africa. But it didn't last long. In the early hours, bells clanged, and then soldiers heard an anchor's chains rattle, barked orders, heavy and frantic footsteps, power winches whirring as they started to lower landing craft into the white-capped water. A radio played. 24-year-old Lieutenant Maurice Footsie Britt, to his surprise, heard the voice of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt announce that the invasion of North Africa had already begun. We figured he had jumped the gun a little, Britt later remembered. After all, we were still 8 miles from shore. Then blonde-haired Britt, all 200 pounds of him, took his place on the landing craft. Finally, the craft headed toward shore. So, I don't have anything here, but can we assume that this is the Africa campaign? World War II? I'll have to look it up online, because I don't remember. I requested, I'm glad I have it, but it doesn't have anything on it at all. I'm going to have to cover this with material. But there you go. Those were the books to start us off. Just some new arrivals to start us off. And the other thing that happened in Jason's video, which is I'm using it to prod me to go back to BookTube, dealt with his Kindle. Jason just recently got a Kindle and loves it. Absolutely loves it. Calls it, as so many of you have called it to me, a game changer. And I have to admit, there's always something extra heartening for me when as dyed-in-the-wool a reader as Jason or Mark Richardson says that, gets it. I always expect that the oldest and most experienced readers are going to resist e-reading. Maybe because 10 years ago, I thought I would resist it. I thought I would go into it with the best of intentions and I would just hate it. And I didn't. I didn't at all. I didn't prefer it. I never for a minute thought, when I was fooling around with the original Nooks that Barnes & Noble made, they had a little black and white thing, and they had an oddly shaped color thing. And when I was fooling around with those things, I was thinking, okay, well, this isn't nearly as bad as I thought. I would never own one of these myself. I would never do this. But I don't object to it. It's still reading. I remember so vividly when that changed, when I realized that there's no distance at all. It's the same thing. I was reading, I had a Trollope novel on an old iPhone of mine, and I was stuck in line, a huge line that I could not get out of. You'll be amazed to learn it was at the Registry of Motor Vehicles. I could not leave. I had to stay in that line. And I started reading and fell into the book. Even though it was an ebook on my phone, I fell into it. And once you realize that aspect of reading, the magic of reading, where you fall into a book, where you just consume it, is unchanged. Once you realize that experience is unchanged when e-reading, once that penny drops, then you're as much a fan. You're never going to, as Jason says in his video, I'm never going to stop buying printed books. But you can get so much extra reading done on an e-reader. And he showed his Kindle. He has, I believe it's the new Paperwhite. This is the old Paperwhite. That is very handy in the hand, and it is flush screen. Sorry, that's a Princeton book. That is Princeton is coming out with a couple of fantastic volumes of Auden, edited and introduced by Edward Mendelsohn. Fantastic. We'll talk about them later in the year when I have something to show you, when I get advanced copies of them. But oh my, it has been so much of a joy. But this is my Kindle Paperwhite, and a lot of you told me you're going to love this. A lot of you told me that your Kindle Paperwhite was a revelatory experience, just an unbelievable game changer of an experience. So I got one, and I got a case for it, and I love it. But in this case, I think I am hamstrung by the form factor. I really do. Most of the e-reading that I do is on my iPad. And my iPad, I have the iPad 9, or I think it's the ninth generation. It was the entry level pricing iPad from just a couple of years ago. So it wasn't $1,000. It was $350 or something like that. I got that iPad and the Magic Keyboard for it. I love it. As a combo, I absolutely love it. It is a tablet that I can do work on. So I think that's fantastic. Just fantastic. In fact, if I could film on that iPad, I'd probably use no other device. But that iPad is made with a certain amount of palm rejection. The iPad it's not as good as it could be, but it is partly aware of whether or not you are trying to do something with it, or if you're just holding it. And this thing, of course, this was $50, so of course it doesn't have anything like that, which means I am forever changing the page on this thing, accidentally. I'm forever backing out of a book accidentally. I've got the cover here. You see, just in order to flap the cover around and put it in place, or to open it and put it in place, I am touching the screen and changing it. Just to do that, without even trying. And that form factor gets annoying when you use the Kindle as much as I do. When you're doing as much reading as I am, that gets annoying. And I found an old Barnes & Noble Nook. See, you've got the N on the back, and a very different form factor. It's not smooth on the back. You've got this rubberized, indented back to it, and it's the same dimensions, but it has wider margins and page turn buttons, and it's recessed. There is no smooth screen there. It is virtually impossible for me to interact with this screen accidentally. Virtually impossible to do. Which makes all the difference in the world. That makes all the difference in the world. Not to mention the fact that Nooks take EPUBs. Kindles are intentionally fussy. Amazon wants to have a proprietary ownership over the format of the ebooks, and Barnes & Noble, I guess, doesn't care as much, because this is not like that. It's not nearly as fussy. Which means that if I take the power cord for this thing and plug this into my computer, I can just move books over onto it. That's my I naturally made my own background. That is Gage Gomez acting all bookish, although it's not completely an act. Yes, I know he's got cheekbones that go on for miles, but he does actually read some, as much as pretty people ever do. But I can just take EPUBs from my computer and put them right on this thing. No converting, no fussing, no muss, no anything like that. And as a result, I have been using this enormously while this is a 10-year-old Nook, while a brand new Paperwhite just sort of sits there. And most of it has to do with form factor. I am never accidentally changing pages on this thing. Never. Because it has the buttons and it's recessed, so I'm not going to touch the screen unless I try to. I found that makes a big difference. The only mystery that I have about this thing is why it seems to be fussing so much about those ebooks. This thing has, I think, 2 gigs of storage on it, something like that. That ought to hold a lot. This thing has 100 ebooks on it. I put 100 ebooks on here. And around 100, I think it's at 104, this transfer process started telling me that you don't have any more space on your Kindle. And I checked, and I don't have any more space on my Kindle. And that should not be true. Right? You tech people out there? I should be able to fit 1,000 books on this thing. Not 100, 2,000. I should be able to fit 1,000 books, at least, on this thing. So I don't know what that is. Is it maybe that there's side-loaded content takes up more space than directly downloaded stuff? I can't imagine that the book files would be different sizes just because of that. I'd love to know the answer to that, and I haven't found it out yet. But it's not a deal breaker, because I've been telling myself, well, you've got 100 great books on here, a couple of new releases, and a bunch of old stuff that you absolutely love. And I put a variety on there so that no matter what, there'd always be something on here that I want to read. I just need to figure out capacity, because I'd like to put new books on here. I'd like to put those, for instance, those Auden books. I'd like to put those on here, and I can't do it at the moment. But it's completely maxed out. But it should not be maxed out at 100 books. I'll figure it out. I'll figure out. There's got to be something. Maybe there's some sort of file directory tree that I'm not understanding. Maybe the books are all accumulating in one space when really they have to be in other spaces. Maybe that's the case. Although when I ask the Nook what your total amount of storage space left is, just for everything, it says barely anything. So, but anyway, that's my ebook update. Is that I very much love the process here, but not the Paperwhite. Unless I learn the trick of not interacting with this thing accidentally, certainly there's no comparison between the two. The one, it never happens, and the other, it happens all the time. So that's your ebook, your e-reader update. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. If you have the same problem with your Paperwhite, a lot of you have Paperwhites and love them. Feel free to tell me, if you have a strategy for not accidentally turning pages. I'd love to hear it. Or if you've just grown used to it. Do you just grow used to that? Or maybe is there a setting on the Paperwhite that does reject a lot of accidental touch? That if there's a setting in this thing that I don't know about, I'd love to know about it. But the e-reading itself is alive and well. It is alive and well on this 10-year-old Nook. And the great thing about the e-ink devices is that you never have to charge them. They're just there. They're always ready to go, which is not the case with probably the best e-ink reader that I've used, the Kindle Amazon Oasis. The Kindle Oasis is really, really good. It's a really, really good device. 10 times sharper than the Nook or the Paperwhite. 10 times more responsive. The page turn, all that, the page refresh, all of that. But you pay a price for that, which is that it's always hungry for power. You can't go a week without needing to charge the thing all the way up to the top. Anyway, look at that. I made a video, and it's an hour long. So I'm going to stop this video for now. But I'm going to hope that this means that I'm back, and that you're all still there. So I will wrap this up and try to upload it. Lots more to come if I'm back in the groove tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.